We can start. Hello all, welcome to this second harmonization body meeting. It's our pleasure to have a lot of people joining this because actually it's all of you, all of us working towards harmonizing and shaping our living labs for the future. As you are aware, this is a body meeting that will continue throughout the project, the life cycle of the project. But our intention, and I hope you share the same vision, is to continue having these body meetings even at the end of the project. Today is a hands-on, there are hands-on activities, nice hands-on activities, which I'm sure all of us will enjoy. I'm giving the floor to Panos committees for a welcome, and then we can move on with the agenda.
Thank you, Evdokimos. Welcome, everyone. I just like to say one or two words, probably. First of all, I hope you enjoyed the Easter break. And second, it's nice to be collaborating on this activity again. We consider this harmonization activities as a key set of activities for the VITALISE project, which is unique in its own right, in the sense that hopefully the suggestions for any standardization activities, but as well as harmonization activities that we're going to get out of the project with the partners, but also the wider research communities and communities of practice involved, are very important and crucial for the continuation of this work, as well as the, I would say, appreciation, but as well as establishment of the living lab approaches within the research streams of other domains, foreign domains, known to the living lab approach as of today. With these words, I'd like to thank you all for your participation, and I hope we have a useful and fruitful outcome of this project meeting.
Thank you very much. We can continue with the agenda. Documents, Panos, if it's okay. Celia, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, of course. Can you see my screen?
Can you put it on presentation mode?
Can you see it now? I think.
Not yet for me. I don't know for everyone. It's still not in presentation mode.
In me it is. I will try again. No?
Yeah, now it's fine. So first of all, we would like to remind you some things that you might have already heard. VITALISE is working towards the harmonization of living labs and the methodology that they are using for working. And it starts from health and well-being living labs, but hopefully it will be a methodology that can be adapted later on from other living labs working in different domains. And currently we have published publicly one standard version, the first one. The second one is ready and will be published very soon after this meeting. And also we will present to you some changes that took place in the second version. In this screen, you can see the general proposal of how the living lab harmonization concept is structured. the different parts that we can see. And today we will focus more on the number 5, the R&D services that Living Labs are providing. And on the other side of this page, you can see the link to the Wiki page, which we also paste in the chat. It is a Wiki-like web page in which we collect all the information that comes out from these harmonization meetings, but also other types of analysis that we do and we decide as a harmonization body. So that is why it is very important, and we would like all of people that are interested in Living Labs to participate and to use. So, Celia, do you want to tell us more about the changes that we have done?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Okay. Regarding the Wiki page, the aim was to collect feedback from the VITALISE Living Labs and some external researchers also. So they were asked to try and test it and then provide their comments on the Wiki. The process that was followed was to collect, summarize, and categorize these comments in an Excel database based on their content and the section on the Wiki to which each one referred. In general, the comments provided concerned both the structure and the organization of the Wiki page, but also its content. So the next step was to try to incorporate them in order to enhance the coherence and the consistency in a way that the content becomes also more understandable and comprehensive. Another point is that in the current version, we added also a short description of the structure of the R&D services, like a brief explanation, let's say, of the key points of the R&D services, what we mean, for example, by pre-tasks, objectives, methods, tools, etc. And another very important aspect is that many comments on the Wiki concern the services titles and the services categories. Regarding the titles, there were made some suggestions, like the one you see here. For example, we had a service named Market and Competitor Intelligence Services. An alternative title suggested was Market and Competitor Analysis, or for prototyping test, it was suggested the title Prototype Testing, some changes like that. For intake and matching, it was suggested Intake and Matchmaking. And for idea selection and testing, an alternative suggested was idea selection and assessment. And in the end of this process, there were 2 independent evaluators who reviewed the content of the feedback provided, and then they resolved any possible conflict before integrating the provided input into the corresponding parts of the Wiki page. We also had some things changed in the section of end users and customer segments in general. So Temo, I think you can proceed.
Yes, hello to all. Yeah, there was a problem about that because we have the one section which is the business model for Living Labs, and one of the under sections in the business model is a customer, and then was a bit confusion about that who is the customer. And for that purpose, we defined end user, which can be a customer as well. So we have an end user who is a person who ultimately uses or is intending to use the product or services. So basically, those are the typical study participants who are participating in our study. So it can be a kind of a customer or user who uses the actual solution. And we will have like non-professional and professional end users. I will have a second page after that. But then also Living Labs has an customers or the end user. And for that, we were defining a term called Living Lab Research Infrastructure End User. So those are the persons or organizations who are purchasing or using our Living Lab infrastructure services to conduct a specific research projects or some kind of a development activity. But also these living lab research infrastructure end users, they can be also study participants. For example, if we are trying to develop our living lab services, so they would be then the end user for us in a way. So this is the kind of the two main categories. And can you change the second slide? And for the end users, so those ones who are typically participating in our studies, we evaluated from the joint research actions all the kind of definitions for the end users that were taking a part for these joint research actions. And based on that, we were kind of doing this kind of a classification, which could be more kind of providing more understanding about the end user bases that we are using. Of course, there are others because this was only collected based on the data that what we had. So typically what we do is that as a living lab, we are separating groups based on the age. So we have the elderly, old, youth, and children, or we had the health status, people being healthy, they are patients or rehabilitant or recovered or survivor. And then, of course, big area for us is the classification based on the specific disease or disorder, disability, or the people being clients of the specific services. And then one big group is the vulnerability groups. So these are the main categories for the end users. And go to the next page. And for the living lab research infrastructure end users, which are, like I say, they are business to business. They can be a business to business customers to the living labs if they are buying services from us. And the typical B2B customers and the professional end user segments includes the different private sector organizations. Either when they're buying something, they're typically coming from the business development or research departments. And we have the public sector organizations, which can be at the local, regional, national, international level, as well as we consider public funders as one of the P2B customers, like the European Commission is the customer, kind of a customer for VITALISE project because they are paying our projects. And then we have educational and research organizations, civic organizations, and different kinds of networks and the clusters. And these expert segments on the right-hand side, they are exactly the same as the version standard version 1, but they can be, like I said, they can have multiple roles. They can be professional end user, but they at the same time they can be our B2B customers. So this is the difference comparing to previous standard.
Temu, before you move to the next one, there is a question for that in the chat.
Yes.
I don't know, Idoia, if you want to.
You mean with the pro consumer, I'm assuming that you are a professional consumer, a person who is not doing the work as a thing, but is a hobbyist or whatever, but have the professional capabilities to do that. Is that right? Idoia, we cannot hear you if you are speaking.
Yeah, sorry, I was silenced. I thought I was muted. Sorry, I thought I wasn't. No, my question was regarding the concept that you are implying of users and consumers at the same time. If that would fit then into the consumer concept, in which we can also, I mean, that can in which we also work on within the living labs, so that I mean, I guess that you are also aware of, so that we do, for example, in our case, within the, for example, the Ocean Lab, we use it around, for example, projects for energy generation, etc. But in which obviously the ones which are the consumers of the, for example, in that sense of the energy, are also the persons who are the users, and so in here, for example, it would kind of refer to individuals who are more than just a consumer of our services within the Living Labs, that they may or may not have this professional interest in our services or in our tools, for example. So I think that in here, for example, what the prosumer concept is would fit ideally in what you're explaining from the business, from the exploitation point of view.
Yeah, so just not sure what's the pro-consumer is for you. Prosumer is for you. For me, it's that the person who have great skills and capabilities and could be operating as a professional in a certain industry, but is actually working in some other industry. Like, for example, I'm been playing guitar many years, and I'm quite good at, but I'm not doing that as a work. But I might be doing that as a work as well. Do you mean that pro-consumer is that kind of a role? Or
yes, yes and no. I mean that I was just asking because because of what you were saying, I know if that it is. I mean, it is what you are saying. I mean, it is basically, it would be a person who would produce some of or would participate in some of those services that are offered, or those produce some of those goods, and at the same time would consume them. So I don't know if that would fit because of what you were explaining. I thought that that's what you were meaning, you know,
yeah,
that
in that sense, I think they have a double role, because they could be then classified also as a professional users, even
exactly.
though they are not, you know, doing that as a work, but they are using the tools and devices or the services to, you know, do create something new or whatever they are doing in that sense. But I think what we can do is that we could be then adding the prosumer in the classification and explaining that this is what is it, and then kind of saying that, you know, they can take a role of a professional, even though they are not, you know, they're doing that as a professional work.
Exactly.
That's good addition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anything else, or do we jump to the next slide? Celia can, yeah. Okay, today is the most important activities. Today is the workshop, and there was, like Celia was saying, there was some comments about the classification of the services. And now, when we're thinking about the aim in here is today that helping the Living Lab operators or the infrastructure end users to understand and communicate that what kind of services we Living Labs are actually offering. And to do that, we would like to, you know, that create some kind of a classification, that similar thing that you go to McDonald's and, you know, they have hamburgers and they have sweets and they have whatever drinks and so forth. And under that, you understand that, okay, there's a variety of hamburgers and variety of the drinks in here. The same thing what we are trying to do now is to create a kind of a classification for our Living Lab services. And on the right hand side, you can see on the existing standard, and then during the previous round, the Legal Lab also proposed some modifications for the classifications. And now the next task is that we will be dividing you into groups, and you as a groups try to define the Living Lab service category names. You can propose whatever names you want, but you could be using this starting point, these two classification as a starting points. And each of the services, and we have at the moment 27 in total, should be fitting in at least one of the categories. But if there's a need, the one service could be fitting also into multiple categories. You will have about 35 minutes to define and agree about the category names as a group, and there will be a facilitator for you in each group. And after that, we will continue in the groups, and there's a individual task where we are mapping the services into correct category. So you will be doing that as an individual work, and you can add the service in the as many categories as you want. And for this, we have about 15 minutes to do the work. And I will share my screen now, so you can see that where we are going. It's this one. You can see this. There will be, I will be zooming this. There will be different groups in here, and you will be automatically transferred to different groups. And group 1 is on the left, second group is on the right hand side, and third and fourth. And depending on which group do you enter, you should be finding the right table. And in here, we will start on the top of this page, where you can see the task exactly which was on the PowerPoint. You see the names in here, and you see the Living Lab services. And the idea is that you will be trying to define the category names, and you can write the names below here. And during the second task, we will have each of the service described in here, and on the right hand side, we will have these kind of right marks in here, and you just move the mark in here if you think that access to data belongs to this category or that category or whatever category. Anybody have any questions about the task? If not, I think there's somebody will transfer us to the different groups. I think we are all back. So I think we just go through each of the groups, and maybe the facilitators will explain what was done in each of the in their group, and I will share my screen for the group 1. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Tim.
Yes, okay. For us, we had the discussion about the different approaches, and in here we had the original title was the assessment, and at the final stage we were discussing also about should we be adding like testing and validation, or it's just assessment. And the comparison was that the assessment will be also including the comparison to the other results, while the testing or validation can be in a way that you just test it in a solution, but you are not comparing the results to somebody else results. And then we have the networking and scalability, and then a very long name, project planning and management, legal, finance, and administrative support. And then we had the co-creation, training and capacity building, and data flow. As you can see in here, that quite many items also included in the multiple categories. And this assessment and testing and validation, basically all the clinical trials, proof of concepts testing, all the testing kind of items were included in here. And in the networking and scalability was capacity building, competition and benchmarking analysis. Also the concepts and proof of concept studies were here, foresighting, grant writing, innovation network orchestration, intake and matching, market and sales support, post-market surveillance testing, public procurement services, stakeholder analysis, and temporary research funding, and project planning and management, and finance, legal, finance, and administrative support was cooling the rental services, expert opinions, grant writing, legal stuff, Living Lab project management, panel management, public procurement services, and stakeholder analysis as well. And co-creation would be the co-creation sessions, innovation network orchestrations, Living Lab project management, and stakeholder analysis as well. And training and capacity building was the capacity building and market and sales support. And finally, data flow, the access to data, and a large scale testing and piloting. So that was what we did. What anything that group wants to be adding in here? Anybody from the group one? If not, I think we can change to the group one, group two. Do you want to share, or do I just show it here?
Yes, you can show it. Thank you, Teemu. What I can see is that we have a lot of things in common, and that is good because there is a tendency in the groups. We have a lot of discussion about the co-creation activities and that this should be a core category, but how we can somehow change the term to be more broad. We come up with co-creation activities, but we are not that sure. We keep also network and capacity building. We have the project planning and management, but as you can see, if you go a bit up, Teemu, in the up in the
Up, sorry.
Yeah. So you demo the financial and administrative support group one, I mean, put it the legal, administrative and financial support in the project planning, but we thought that it would be nice to have two separate categories, one which includes the planning, both internally in the Living Lab, but also support externally the planning, but have a more general category as well, which is the consultation and advising, and this includes all the legal, financial and administrative support. And then we have this testing and validation. We like both the terms because we can validate, but we can also test without validating. And we thought also that an interesting category is about how we take all what we do to the market. So we keep the support on market uptake. We started a discussion about the exploration because we wanted something that is before all these activities, but we couldn't define and find a specific word at the end. And we have done a categorization, an assignment in general, so you can see it here. And we didn't want to exclude, so one service can belong to a lot of categories. So you can have an overall view. I will not go one by one, and we didn't have time to finish them all, unfortunately.
Yeah, clearly there's, because we also had the tendency to add the service in the multiple categories as well. So that seems to be clear. Yeah, and the third group we had, unless anybody from the group 2 had some additional comments. If not, then the group 3.
Yes, we defined the 5 categories, but we were thinking of adding one more if you go a bit up, Teemu. For example, the first one is capacity building. Between capacity building and co-creation, we were thinking of probably adding another category, like Despina said, regarding exploration, then, but without using the word market, because maybe there would be a confusion with the 5th category. So we have co-creation, but without using methodologies as a word, evaluation and validation. The 4th, legal, financial and administrative support. And the 5th, like you said before, regarding market, but using the word upscale instead of uptake. And I think, yes, one by one, maybe it's too hard to see, but we kept this one in multiple categories, not just in one.
Anybody in the group having any comments?
Yeah, so from my side, I marked the last services. There were 2 without any black points because we were not able to insert those in any of these categories, what means that we are missing some category. We were discussing it, but we couldn't find a good name for it, but it's about the consultancy and experts advising. Yeah, I think it's related with what Despona presented as their so category and the way they define it. So the way we understanding capacity building is a way wider than a capacity building service in itself. So capacity building can be in the different kind of activities we can support and transfer and train others. So we took this as a non-category that can have different services inside. So it's just a different way of, it's a different definition, of course. So this is why we leave it in white without the black dots, because it was a capacity, it was a category in itself.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think maybe that
sorry, Timo. So we also consider a wider understanding of administrative support. So this is why we also eliminate another category that was proposed by Lika Lab, that was in a planning project or something like that. We considered that on administrative support, but might not be the best way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I was trying to say that maybe we should be kind of defining that what we mean as for the capacity building as a term. What does it mean for everybody? And this is kind of, and also the one thing that during the consortium meeting, there will be this lexicon building activity. So that's will be one of the tasks that could be helping to define the terms as well. And now we have the final group. So who was in the final group?
The fourth group, yes, Temu. We discussed several ideas for its category. We stopped in the 7 marketing and sales support. We have a quite interesting discussion. In the first one, we discussed about capacity building. That is an appropriate title for our category. Then the community and network building. Then the market exploration. We have also an interesting discussion about the co-creation. We discussed about either co-creation design or co-creation itself. So we want to be co-creation, and then the testing instead of real life. Let me see. Real life testing itself. Then we discussed about infrastructures and IT tools that it's
yeah, that's quite interesting, this infrastructure, at least to me, in a way that it's, yeah, as a category. I think that's pretty good.
And the advisory services, we had an idea that this is a very wide range of a title for category itself. So maybe we could have more categories about advisory services or subcategorization about that. because this is a very wide range as a title. Other services are regulated, others are not. We have export advice. We have many kind of services that we could include advices for. So maybe that is something that we have to discuss about and find out.
Yeah. Okay, we are about running out of time, and I think one conclusion what we could be making in here is that the many of the items belongs to the multiple categories, and the other thing is that it's kind of follows also. There's a one way to that we could be following this kind of an innovation process, like we have a co-creation and we have a testing and we have this exploitation or market exploitation or whatever. I think that's also one valid question for all of us, that should we be kind of following the Living Lab innovation process category somehow? Is that one way to do the approach? Or and if it's so, then probably once we've been agreeing about the stages of the Living Lab innovation process or the research process, so that could be also helping us to define the categories in here. And clearly the one thing was also that, you know, how do we tackle the things beyond the single you know, the Living Lab project? So in all the kind of covering all the network activities and the scalability issues beyond the single project. So that's also an important thing that we have to be thinking about, that how we could be adding the service classification and the services as well over there, because I think that we have more services than we have listed at the moment. So that's probably that we have to be looking forward in the future as well. So any other comments from anybody else? Do Despina or Documents want to say something, or anybody else?
As a final comment, I wanted to say that I see a lot of commonalities among the groups, which means that at least we are starting to talk the common language among us. It is a very important issue how we communicate that to people that do not know at all what Living Labs is. So we might start opening up to that people as well and start asking them if they understand what we are saying, because for us capacity building might be something very clear, but for others not. And that these discussions are also very useful for another work that we are starting from beginning of March, which is the VITALISE lexicon, and actually the Living Lab lexicon. So defining that terms that we use in order to understand what we mean with that. So that was as a closing comments from my side, and thank you all for participating.
Yes, I think we are then ready if nobody else is saying anything else. And thanks a lot for this. And the work continues. We could be saying we are not yet ready, but like Despina was saying, we are closing. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.